So we are a week in to our New Year's goals. How many of you are still on track? And how many of you have been completely thrown off because of something unforeseen or foreseen or predictable, but it still threw you off? So if you're still on track, then you are doing better than most of the country or even the world. Because by the second week in January, statistics show that most people have given up on their New Year's resolutions. And that's without disaster hitting, right? That's just because they just don't stick with it. That's just the way it goes. But I'm just curious how many of you have been thrown off because of either COVID or something else going on in your life. So we've had a visitor in our house. We had COVID come to visit. So we are in that place with a lot of you. And it's really interesting. I think this is super interesting because the person in my family who has COVID doesn't want to be named. And I'm like, why? I mean, the medical person in me is just like, why? This is a clinical thing. It's not a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal. COVID's a big deal. But I'm not buying into the narrative of like, it's almost like, I feel like so many people, there's such a fight over it, the politics and all that. I don't want to get into all that. But rather than focusing on the actual virus and getting people well, so many people feel like, oh, they have to wear a sign around their neck that says unclean, unclean, like we did with lepers so long ago. It's like if you don't believe like everybody else believes, or if you get sick, you don't want anyone to know. I even had one of the kids in the house, I had to call and let the schools know that they'd been exposed. They're not even sick. And they're like, please don't tell them. And they're like, I don't want my friends to know because they're gonna harass me. And I'm like, what world are we living in? But anyways, that's a whole nother thing. That's not why I'm here today. But how many of you have been thrown off by something like this, right? Because now I'm in this weird place. I'm sitting in my house waiting, sort of isolating and going, am I gonna get sick? Am I not gonna get sick? And so how do you deal with things like that? And so my way of dealing with that, I don't know how many of you have done this, but to be fair, I've already been through major crisis in my life. To those of you who've been through major crisis in your life, when crisis hits, like even when COVID hit and it was scary and when it first hit and it's still sort of scary, it's, we sat back and we went, okay, this is crazy. We're going to figure out what's going on here. But if you've been through life-threatening crisis in your life, and you've had the thought, I might not live through this, you handle things, I think, a little bit differently. So for so many of our youth, it's a crazy time. And you have this tendency, a lot of people have a tendency to want to give up on whatever's going on in their lives with their goals. They sort of feel hopeless. They feel helpless. I'm going to put my glasses on because I want to see your comments. So true. This is nothing compared to what you've gone through, right? So for a lot of people, that's true. So in my past, I don't know how many of you have read my book, The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child, but I was 23 and thought I had the world by the tail. I tested for Playboy, was accepted. Now that's a whole different time, another story, different life, but had just been told I was going to be a centerfold. And then within a matter of weeks, I was told I had cancer. And my whole world came crashing down around me. Couldn't even sort of wrap my brain around the C world, sunk into this deep depression, was going through medical treatments, and I wanted to die. So after that, something like this was weird. It was scary, but I had sort of already been down that road of like facing my mortality. And a lot of you have also faced your mortality. And so for those of you who have, it was not as hard. For our kids, super hard. And so it was a very different thing, and we have to try to help them through this, right? So I guess the question is, do you double down or do you get discouraged? Do you resign or do you refine when things go bad? And so I know in my house, my husband thinks I'm a little intense. I know that's hard to imagine. I'm a little intense. I'm a little over the top. But I've already been down that road of feeling completely hopeless, of feeling like I wanted to die. I just can't go there again. I just can't do it. So I know that it's very easy. It's a fine line. And so, yeah, someone's saying double down. Exactly, fight. But here's the thing. You can't show up on fight day and start training. You got to train every day, right? So that's why we live the way we live. That's why we wrote The Brain Warrior's Way. It's part of why I wrote The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child, was to just show people, look, even if you've been through really bad times, your history is not your destiny, but you got to sort of train every day. And so I've been living through this whole pandemic as though, okay, what happens if I get COVID, right? So I have to be really careful because I know it's like no matter what you say, you're either going to get creamed by half of the public or you're going to get deplatformed. But I do believe your immunity is your strongest defense. And so, I've exercised, I've been cooking as much as I can, eating healthy. So even right now, after I've probably been exposed, I've modified my exercise so it's a little lighter, so I'm not putting strain on my system. I'm taking cold showers because that stimulates it, like kickstarts your immunity. Taking the right supplements. Let's see, what are some of the things I'm doing? Sleep. I'm doing sauna and my hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So some would say, oh, well, none of that works. It's just, that's all mental. Okay, there's a reason placebos work. I actually believe those do work. But even if it's only because I believe they work, all right, I'm willing to go along with that. So mindset, exactly, so much, and really helped me prioritize. Your mindset is everything. So I'm sort of doing everything right now. I'm trying to stay away from the person sick. I'm trying to do all these things. So someone is saying, what vitamins do you suggest? So you can actually look this protocol up online. But what I'm taking is liposomal vitamin C, vitamin D, like a lot of vitamin D. I'm taking zinc, quercetin, my multivitamin, my regular fish oil, probiotics, all that stuff. And so that is that's what I'm doing, plus my sleep and now my light exercise. But cold showers it was actually a friend that reminded me about that. I sort of got out of that. And for 4 minutes till you get a shiver. And then it actually helps to kickstart your immunity. It'll work if you do the work. Yes. Belief drives behavior. Love that. Totally agree. So a couple things that we always want people to remember, and this has been hard during this time, because what helps me and what helps in our house is this idea that when crisis strikes, you remember that it's temporary, local, and controllable. Now, how much of COVID and this pandemic has felt temporary, local, or controllable to any of you, right? I know it doesn't really, but here's the deal. You chunk it down to the point that it does feel that way to you. Even things that cancer didn't feel that way to me. It didn't feel temporary. Local, I don't know, maybe it was in my body, but that was like not okay. Didn't help. And it certainly didn't feel controllable. But what you do is you chunk it down to where it feels temporary, local, and controllable. So in my house, right? In my house, it feels local. Temporary, I'm like, well, nothing lasts forever. Absolutely nothing lasts forever. And controllable. What is it that I can control? I'm focusing on what I can control, not on what I can't control. The minute I turn on the news, I can't control anything, and it just sends me into orbit. So I focus on the things I can control. I turn off the news. I'm cooking with all these fresh herbs and spices. I'm sort of a prepper, right? Drives my husband crazy. We are literally like yin and yang in my house. I'm very yang. He is the yin to my yang. So he helps like ground me. But it used to drive him crazy. He's like, why do we spend all this money on stuff? We live in this very safe place, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I don't know why you think that we're never going to have a disaster strike where we live, but that's not my nature after the way I lived, the way I grew up. So when the pandemic hit and nobody could find toilet paper, I just laughed. I'm like, you can either say thank you, or I will say, I told you so for the rest of your life. Anyways, so that's how I manage my stress, right? So I sort of prep, and my way of taking care of my body is also how I sort of prep. It's like I'm doing something. I'm a proactive person. I can't just sit back and let things happen. So I want to hear, how do you guys manage your stress? How do you sort of stay on track, make it temporary, local, and controllable? And how do you double down? Or do you just sit back and let it happen? So if you do, just be forewarned, you're probably going to not feel too great when things start to go sideways. So not physically, mentally, spiritually, or socially. That's, people who just sort of don't sort of manage their own minds don't do quite as well. So listen to your body, absolutely. And so one thing I do with the news, I grab headlines only and not usually from the regular news sources, right? So Florida sunshine helps a lot. Love Florida. Absolutely. Meditation, green tea, these are all my things. Smoothies, sleep, and music. And I'm sitting here with my ginger lemon water with cayenne pepper, right? I know it sounds really crazy, but it really helps. So this is one of the ways I do this. Stay hydrated. Love these comments coming in. You guys have great ideas. Of course, you're watching things that are positive things. So you, of course, baths, absolutely. Epsom salts are great. So I love this. I'm going to lose all of these comments, which I absolutely love. So I would love it if you either send me messages or go to this video and send me questions or leave me comments, because I don't know why Instagram stopped posting the comments when we post the video, but they did. So I'm going to lose all this. Someone said that's a huge mug. I'm hydrating. Of course it's a huge mug. So I agree. Meditation is just one of the best ways to manage your mind. So pray, talk to a good friend. All of these are great. This will be posted right after this on IGTV, but I'm going to lose all the comments. So thank you all. Love hearing your comments. This is part of how I stay grounded, is sort of like talking to my community, hearing what you guys are doing. You guys were great through the pandemic. My husband and I posted almost every single day, and it's just really helpful. And so maybe I'll post some stuff while I'm cooking. Tonight, I'm going to make my lentil soup. One thing you can do if you want some really healthy recipes, you can go to tanaamen.com. That's one thing I've done, is post a bunch of my recipes. I've got over 400 recipes in my cookbooks. So would love to know what some of your favorite healthy recipes are that keep your family, really healthy during this time. All right. Thanks, you guys. Stay with your goals. Even if you have to refine them, they may not look the same. That's okay. If you have to change course a whole bunch of times, okay, hello, kitty. When you're on the freeway and there's an accident in front of you, your GPS might reroute you, but you don't just stop on the freeway and decide not to go forward, right? So refine, don't resign. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.